I wasn't planning on going up to the attic that morning. It wasn't on my list, and honestly, I hate attics. They always smell like forgotten things, like dust and heat and stale wood, as if they're holding their breath until someone finally decides to climb up and disturb them. But I needed my blue sweater, the one I'd packed away too early, thinking summer would last longer. The nights had turned chilly, and I wanted it. Mark had promised to grab it for me over the weekend, but he'd already left for work, and I didn't want to wait. The attic ladder was one of those folding kinds that creaked like old knees when you tugged it down. I pulled the cord, and it groaned its complaint, unfolding with slow reluctance. A breath of hot air spilled down, thick with dust. It smelled of insulation, of cardboard left in the sun, of faint sweetness, like perfume that had lingered long after the person was gone. I wrinkled my nose but climbed anyway. The bulb overhead gave off a weak, yellow glow when I pulled the chain. Rafters spread above me like ribs. Piles of insulation sat in dunes along the edges. Dust floated in the air, turning the space into a snow globe. Our big black suitcase lay shoved into a corner, zipper half open, strap dangling. I crouched, tugging it toward me, the ladder groaning under every shift of my weight. As I pulled, something bumped against my knee. A smaller box slid free from behind the suitcase and landed with a dull thud. A shoe box, red lid scuffed at the corners, a strip of masking tape across the top with neat handwriting, wool blankets. The words looked faded, like they'd been written years ago. I frowned. We didn't own any box like that. We hadn't labeled anything with masking tape. I brushed the dust off with my palm, leaving streaks of red against the dull gray. My stomach tightened. My brain whispered, just shove it back. But curiosity is louder than caution. Always is. I lifted the lid. Inside, beneath a thin sheet of tissue, were things that didn't belong to me. Things that shouldn't have been in my attic. A bundle of envelopes tied with twine. A slim black notebook, the elastic broken. A brass key, cold and narrow, the kind you hardly ever see anymore. A small flash drive in a plastic sleeve, the words "Watch Last" written in blocky caps across a strip of tape. At the very bottom, tucked flat against the cardboard, lay a Polaroid face down. I reached for the notebook first. The cover was soft with wear, edges curled from being opened too often. On the first page, in tidy handwriting, was a name, Laura. My chest tightened. I knew that name. Mark's ex. The woman he never talked about. He had only mentioned her once, in passing, the night we first moved into this house. We'd been sitting on the living room floor with cheap takeout and a blanket because we didn't own furniture yet. He'd laughed when I asked about past relationships, kissed me on the forehead, and said, her name was Laura. Wrong timing, wrong everything. I thought I could fix it. She thought I was the thing that needed fixing. We grew up. We moved on. His smile had been kind, final, as if there was nothing more to know. But here her name was, staring at me from a notebook in our attic. I flipped through the first few pages. Short fragments filled them. Rules. Notes. Almost warnings. He's sorry when his voice is low. Don't believe sorry that only whispers. If the apology makes you feel smaller, it's not an apology. He brings flowers when he wants silence, not forgiveness. My throat went dry. These weren't love notes. They were survival notes. I shoved the notebook back into the box, my pulse quickening. My fingers brushed the Polaroid at the bottom. Slowly, I turned it over. It was our kitchen. Same layout, same table under the window, but the cabinets were still the old dark oak before Mark had them painted white. On the table sat two mugs. One had a chip in the rim, the same mug Mark still uses for tea. On the back, written in delicate blue ink, he says we never talk here. So I took a picture to prove we did. Dated March 2022. My breath caught. Less than a year before I met Mark. I slid the photo back and picked up the envelopes. The first one I opened wasn't even addressed to anyone specific, just to the next person who needs it. The handwriting wavered slightly, the ink smudged in places. I unfolded the letter with careful fingers. If you're reading this, it began, then you've already started opening things. Boxes. Questions. Maybe doors. I thought I could keep them shut forever. I was wrong. He is generous until you say no. He is patient until you ask when. He is honest until you know what to ask. If you feel the shift in your bones, don't ignore it. It's not just you. It's the house too. It remembers. The words blurred for a second because my eyes burned. I folded it back and slipped it under the twine again, my hands trembling. That was when my fingers touched the key. Brass, thin, cold. I held it up to the light. Not a house key. Maybe a desk, maybe a storage unit. My heart pounded, telling me not to pocket it, but my hand closed around it anyway. It was mine now, at least until I figured out why Laura had left it. The flash drive lay waiting at the edge of the box, small and harmless. Watch last. The words looked heavier the longer I stared. Last after what? After you already know too much? After you're too far in to stop? I didn't pick it up. Not yet. I put everything back as neatly as I could, slid the lid on, and shoved the box behind the suitcase again. Only the key stayed with me, slipped into my pocket. It felt like carrying someone else's heartbeat. When I came downstairs, the house looked the same as it always did at 10 in the morning. Sunlight on the tiles. The faint smell of coffee from yesterday's pot. A note from Mark on the counter. Leftover pasta, lunch? Love you. Ordinary, safe. But the ordinary felt thinner now, like wallpaper hiding rot. I tried to read. I tried to clean. But my mind wouldn't let go of that attic box. Laura. The letters. The Polaroid. The warnings written like they were meant for me. By the time Mark came home, carrying takeout and smiling his tired, easy smile, I had almost convinced myself to forget it. He kissed me, set the bags down, and asked about my day. Uneventful. I lied, pressing my hands flat against the counter so he wouldn't see them shake. We ate curry on the porch, and he teased me for always stealing his spring rolls. For a little while, it worked. Routine always works, until it doesn't. Later, after he fell asleep on the couch, I found myself in his office, staring at the flash drive in my palm. It was small, ordinary, but it felt heavier than anything else in the house. I slid it into his laptop. A folder popped open with 3 files, an audio clip, a short video, and a PDF titled Storage, Unit 104. My chest tightened. I didn't open them. Not yet, but I knew I would. The flash drive was so small in my hand, but it felt heavier than anything else in the house. The words scrawled across the tape, "Watch last," buzzed in my mind. I promised myself I would only take a glance, just enough to calm the unease in my chest. But deep down, I knew there was no such thing as just a glance. Curiosity doesn't stop halfway. When the folder opened, 3 items appeared: an audio recording, a short video simply titled Kitchen, and a PDF about a storage unit. My stomach twisted. Nothing about them looked extraordinary, yet I felt as though each one was a door I couldn't close once I stepped through. The video tempted me, but faces always feel the most dangerous. I clicked the document first, because words on a page, no matter how heavy, feels safer than eyes staring back. It was a rental agreement for a storage unit across town. The name on the contract was Laura. My breath caught. The start date was April 2022, only months before Mark and I met. Paid for 6 months in advance. At the bottom of the page, written by hand in sharp ink, was a note. Asterisk, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. Asterisk. Sorry for what? For leaving it behind. For me finding it? I leaned back in the chair, the paper glowing on the screen, but it didn't feel like paper. It felt like a crack forming in a wall I hadn't known was fragile. I closed the file and clicked the audio next. Static hummed, then a woman's voice emerged. Laura. Rule number 4, she said, her tone tired but steady. He never tells the whole truth. He tells the part that makes him look safe. A pause, then a shaky breath. Rule number 5, if you ever doubt, follow the doubt. It's the only thing that's never lied to me. For a long stretch, there was nothing. Then muffled sobbing, as if she'd buried her face in a pillow. It ended with the sharp slam of a door somewhere in the background. My skin prickled. I hovered over the video. Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut, pretend I had never gone this far. But the title burned into me. Kitchen. I clicked. The screen flickered to life, showing our kitchen. Not exactly ours, but close. The old dark oak cabinets, the table under the window, the chipped mug. Laura sat at that table, her hair loose, her face pale and drawn. She looked straight into the lens. If you're watching this, she said, her voice even but brittle, you probably think you're the only one. That's how he makes it feel. Like the things that scare you are only in your head. Like you're weak for noticing. She glanced down, then back up, her eyes sharp. I thought the same thing. I stayed too long. I excused too much. I believed him when he said I was overreacting. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It seeps out. Into the walls, into the air, into the way you flinch when keys rattle in the door. My breath came shallow, my hands gripping the desk. In the background of the video, footsteps echoed. A man's voice called her name. Mark's voice. Casual, warm, the same way he calls mine when he walks in. Laura didn't flinch, didn't look away. She leaned closer to the camera, whispering quickly, "There's a key. A desk drawer. If you haven't found it yet, it's in the box." My heart jolted. The brass key in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed a stone. The camera wobbled, as if she'd grabbed it to end the recording. For a fraction of a second, before the screen went black, I saw her mouth form words I couldn't hear. Then silence. I sat frozen, the glow of the laptop painting my hands pale. The house around me was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I yanked the flash drive out and slammed the laptop shut. My pocket burned with the weight of the key. My mind spun with Laura's words. A desk drawer. Proof, hidden somewhere in plain sight. I turned toward the desk. The top drawer had a tiny lock, the kind you don't notice until you know to look for it. The brass key fit the shape perfectly. My hand shook as I slid it closer. Then I heard the crunch of gravel outside, the sound of Mark's car pulling into the driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. I snatched the key back, shoved it into my pocket, and shut the drawer before testing it. By the time Mark stepped through the front door, calling my name with that same easy warmth I'd just heard in Laura's video, I was standing in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water like nothing had happened. "Hey, babe," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl. His smile was tired, gentle. "Sorry I'm late. Client dragged on forever." I forced a smile back, my hands trembling around the glass. "It's fine. How was it?" He started telling me about traffic, about some ridiculous argument at the office. I nodded, laughed in the right places, but my ears rang with Laura's words. Asterisk, he never tells the whole truth. He tells the part that makes him look safe. Asterisk. And for the first time since I'd married him, I didn't know which part of his smile belonged to me, and which part belonged to her. After Mark came home that night, I barely heard a word he said. He sat across from me at the table, recounting office drama, laughing softly, asking if I wanted more rice. I nodded at the right times, smiled when I thought I should, but my mind wasn't there. It was trapped upstairs in his office, circling the flash drive and the brass key burning in my pocket. Laura's voice wouldn't leave me. "There's a key. A desk drawer." Every time Mark smiled at me, I wondered which part of that smile had belonged to her first. When he finally drifted to sleep on the couch, I sat in the dim light, staring at the muted TV. My legs felt heavy, but they carried me back to the office anyway. The drawer seemed to watch me as I entered, its tiny lock gleaming in the desk lamp's glow. I set the key on the surface, listening to the faint metallic clink. My heart thundered so hard I was sure it would wake the whole house. For long minutes, I just sat there, staring. 100 reasons screamed not to open it. What if it was nothing? What if it was everything? What if Laura had planted it all just to haunt me? But the memory of her face on that video, pale, steady, resigned, pressed me forward. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for me. The drawer slid open with a soft groan. Inside was a folder, thick with papers, and a small stack of photographs bound by a rubber band. My fingers hovered, trembling, before I picked up the photos. The first picture was of Mark, younger, maybe 2 years ago. He was standing in the kitchen, the same chipped mug in his hand. Laura sat at the table, blurred from movement. She wasn't smiling. On the back, in that same delicate blue handwriting, "He only asks if I'm okay when he needs me to say yes." My stomach turned. The second photo showed the outside of our house, the porch light glowing. A shadow in the window, Mark's silhouette. On the back, "Home doesn't always mean safe." My hands shook as I flipped through the rest. They weren't violent, not graphic. They were worse. Ordinary snapshots twisted by the words scrawled behind them. Mark sitting with his head in his hands. His apologies always end with what I owe him. A picture of flowers in a vase. He buys these when he wants silence. The last photo was of Laura herself, standing in front of the mirror, eyes tired, the words behind it. "I don't know if he loves me or the idea of winning." I pressed the stack down on the desk, fighting nausea. The folder waited. I slid it out carefully, unfolding the first page. Letters. Dozens of them. Some typed, some handwritten, some barely more than a paragraph. They were all from Laura, addressed to no one and everyone. Pages of confessions, warnings, rules. Some were practical, almost clinical. Others were raw, ink blurred with what looked like tears. One letter in particular froze me. He is careful with what he says, but watch his silences. They're sharper than words. They carve you down until you doubt your own voice. I set it aside, shaking. The drawer wasn't empty yet. At the very back was another envelope, different from the rest. Plain white, sealed with fresh tape, and on the front, in bold letters, Emily. My heart slammed. My hands went cold. My name. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Just one line, written in Laura's neat hand. If you are reading this, then he told you I was the problem. The paper slipped from my hands. My knees weakened. I had to grip the edge of the desk just to stay upright. The sound of movement behind me made me jump. The house was quiet, but I swore I heard the creak of a floorboard in the hall. I spun around, but the doorway was empty. Still, my chest pounded like I'd been caught. I shoved everything back into the drawer, crammed the photos and letters under the folder, and locked it again. The key dug into my palm as I pulled it free. I switched off the lamp and slipped back to the living room. Mark was still on the couch, asleep, his face peaceful in the flickering TV glow. I stood there for a long time, watching him, searching his features for the man I knew and the man Laura had written about. For the first time, I couldn't tell if they were the same. The letter with my name burned in my mind. Laura had known I would find it. She had written to me, as if she had been waiting for me all along. And the only thought that echoed through my head as I stared at my sleeping husband was, how much of Laura's story was mine now, too? I barely slept that night. The letter with my name on it replayed in my mind until dawn. The neat handwriting seared into the back of my eyelids. Asterisk if you are reading this. Then he told you I was the problem. Asterisk. I lay beside Mark, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if he was really asleep or just pretending like I was. Every creak of the house felt louder, every tick of the clock sharper. By the time the sun began to rise, I felt wrung out, like I'd lived a whole week inside a single night. Mark stirred, stretched, and kissed my shoulder. You okay? He asked softly. It was such a simple question, one he'd asked me 100 times before. But now I wondered if Laura had once heard the same question, in the same tone, and if she had smiled back at him the way I did now, while secretly falling apart inside. Yeah, I whispered, forcing a smile. Just didn't sleep much. He searched my face for a moment longer than usual, then nodded and went to shower. The day dragged. I tried working on my laptop, tried folding laundry, even tried calling my sister just to hear a familiar voice. But my mind kept circling back to that drawer, the photographs, the letters, my name. By late afternoon, I found myself standing in the office again, staring at the locked drawer. The key weighed in my pocket. I didn't open it, but I didn't leave either. I just stood there, frozen, like a child daring herself to touch a flame. Looking for something? Mark's voice made me jump. He stood in the doorway, drying his hands with a dish towel. I turned quickly, heart hammering. No, I was just tidying up. His eyes flicked to the desk, then back to me. You don't usually tidy in here. I forced a laugh. I was bored. He smiled faintly, but something about it felt off. Well, don't get lost in my mess, he said lightly, and walked past me to grab his phone from the desk. My stomach twisted as I saw his hand linger on the top drawer just a second too long before he pocketed the phone. That evening we had dinner with his mother, Margaret. She was a stern woman with sharp eyes that seemed to cut through small talk. Over roasted chicken and potatoes, she asked, "How are you settling in, Emily?" "Good," I said quickly. Too quickly. Her gaze lingered on me, unreadable. And the house. I hesitated. It's different. Margaret's mouth tightened, almost like she wanted to smile but couldn't. Houses keep secrets, she said. Sometimes they tell them to the wrong people. Mark chuckled. Mom, don't start with your spooky sayings again. But she didn't laugh. She kept staring at me, and I had to look down at my plate just to breathe. That night, when we got home, Mark poured himself a drink and sank into the couch. I watched him, the way he avoided my eyes, the way his fingers tapped the glass. Mark, I began, my voice shaking. Can I ask you something? He glanced over. Of course. What happened with Laura? The question hung in the air like smoke. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before he leaned back and sighed. I told you. We weren't right for each other. She wasn't happy. Nothing I did was enough. Eventually she decided I was the problem. The words pierced me. The exact words from Laura's letter. She said that. I whispered. Mark frowned. I don't remember the exact words. Why? My chest tightened. I shook my head quickly. No reason. But inside, something cracked wider. He had told me she was the problem. Exactly what Laura had warned I'd hear. When Mark finally went upstairs, I lingered in the kitchen, staring at the shadows pooling along the floor. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, pale and tense. I pulled the key from my pocket and clenched it so tight it left an imprint in my skin. I thought of the photos, the words scribbled on their backs. Asterisk, he is generous until you say no. Asterisk, asterisk, home doesn't always mean safe. Asterisk, asterisk, I don't know if he loves me or the idea of winning. Asterisk. And the letter addressed to me, waiting like a trap she had set years ago. Mark's footsteps creaked overhead. I held the key tighter, my pulse racing. He knew. I was sure of it. He knew I had been in the drawer. And the question that chilled me wasn't what else Laura had left for me to find. It was asterisk how far Mark would go to keep me from finding it. Asterisk. That night the house felt heavier, like the walls had soaked up everything left unsaid at dinner and were pressing it back out into the air. I tried to sleep, but the silence kept shifting, carrying echoes that weren't there. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the letter with my name on it. Laura's neat handwriting. Her warning. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then he told you I was the problem. Asterisk. Mark's steady breathing beside me didn't comfort me anymore. It scared me. I lay on my side, staring at his back, wondering what part of him belonged to me and what part Laura had already known. The darkness seemed to breathe with me, a low tide rising and falling in the room. At some point, I slipped out of bed. The house groaned in protest as I padded down the hallway. My hand trembled as I reached the office door. Inside, the desk seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight sneaking through the blinds. The key in my pocket felt like it had a pulse of its own. I locked the door behind me and slid the key into the drawer's lock. It opened with a soft click, too eager, as though it had been waiting for me. I pulled the folder out again, but this time I didn't stop at the photographs or the letters I had already seen. I dug deeper. At the bottom was another envelope, thick, sealed tightly. My name wasn't on this one, but Laura's was. I tore it open. Inside were printed emails, conversations between Laura and Mark. The first ones were ordinary, grocery lists, work stress, jokes about neighbors. Then the tone shifted. Mark's messages grew shorter, sharper. Hers became pleading, trying to hold the thread together. The last one made my throat close. It was Laura writing, asterisk, you told me no one would believe me. Maybe you're right. But if anyone does find this, at least I'll know I tried. Asterisk. I shoved the papers back into the folder while rising in my throat. My hand brushed against something taped to the underside of the drawer. I leaned closer, peeled the tape back. A small flash drive, different from the one in the attic. No label, just silence waiting to speak. I slid it into the laptop. Only one file appeared, a video. My heart pounded as I clicked. The screen filled with the image of the same office I sat in. The camera was angled from the corner, grainy, like it had been recorded in secret. Laura sat in the chair I was sitting in now. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying. She looked directly into the lens. If you're watching this, she said softly, then you know he didn't tell you everything. He never does. She swallowed hard. You need to leave before the pattern repeats. He doesn't lose. He can't. You'll think you're the exception. You'll think your love makes you safer. I thought that too. She paused, tears spilling over. But love doesn't protect you from someone who believes they're always right. It only makes you easier to hurt. Her head turned suddenly, eyes widening. A door creaked open off camera. A man's voice filled the room. Calm, too calm. Mark's voice. Laura, what are you doing? The screen went black. I yanked the drive out as though it had burned me. My chest heaved. My whole body shook. I could still hear his voice, the exact same tone he used when asking me harmless questions, like, did you feed the cat? Or, want me to pour you some wine? The normalness of it made it worse. It sounded like routine, but in that moment it had been a threat. The office door rattled. I froze. It rattled again. Mark's voice called softly from the hall. Emily, you in there? My pulse spiked. I scrambled, shoving the folder back into the drawer, slamming it shut, twisting the key free. I slipped it into my pocket just as he opened the door. He leaned against the frame, smiling faintly. Couldn't sleep either? I forced my lips to curve. No, just thought I'd get some reading done. His eyes flicked to the desk, then back to me. In here. He stepped inside, each footfall slow, deliberate. You don't usually read in my office. My mouth went dry. I guess I wanted a change of scenery. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Fair enough. He came closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, faint and sharp. His gaze lingered on my pocket. What's that? I pressed my hand down, hiding the key. Nothing. Just a pen. He studied me for one long, unbearable second, then smiled again. All right. He kissed my temple. Try to get some rest. Then he left. I sat frozen until I heard his footsteps fade upstairs. Only then did I let the sob claw its way out of my chest. The next morning, Margaret called. Her voice crackled through the line, sharp and insistent. Emily, can you come by this afternoon? Alone. Something in her tone made my stomach knot. She knew. Somehow she knew. I drove over after lunch, nerves stretched tight. Margaret greeted me at the door with eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in years. She led me to the kitchen, poured tea neither of us touched. You found it, didn't you? She asked quietly. I hesitated. Lying felt impossible. Yes. Her jaw tightened. I warned him. I told Mark that secrets don't stay buried in attics and drawers. They rot. They rise. And now you're in it too. My chest ached. What happened to her? What happened to Laura? Margaret looked down at her cup, her hands trembling. She wanted out. He couldn't stand losing. I swallowed hard. Did he? The words lodged in my throat. Did he hurt her? Her eyes flicked up, sharp and wet. You already know the answer, or you wouldn't be asking. I shook my head violently. No. No. There has to be another explanation. Maybe she left. She didn't leave. Margaret cut in, voice like steel. She disappeared. And the only person who knows why is my son. The room spun. My fingers dug into the edge of the table. Emily, Margaret said, leaning closer, her whisper trembling. You need to leave before you disappear too. I drove home in a daze. Mark was waiting on the porch, smiling as if nothing had changed. He wrapped his arm around me, kissed my cheek, asked about my day. I nodded, pretending, but inside I was unraveling. That night, as he slept, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Laura's letters, the photos, the videos, Margaret's warning, my name written in ink years before I ever stepped into this house. It all pressed on me like a weight I couldn't breathe under. At some point I slipped out of bed again. The house was dark still. I padded to the office, heart racing, and unlocked the drawer one last time. I pulled out the letters, the photos, the flash drives. I stuffed them into a bag. My hands shook as I zipped it shut. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not another night. The floor creaked behind me. I turned slowly. Mark stood in the doorway. His eyes were calm, too calm. Emily, he said softly, almost gently. What are you doing? The bag slipped from my hands. He took a step closer, the shadows swallowing his face. You've been busy. My pulse thundered. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Then he smiled, just barely, and whispered, You found the box. The room seemed to tilt, the weight of his words pressing down like stone. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. And in that suffocating silence, one truth rang louder than all the rest. Laura had been right.